They tied her wrists, shoved her to her knees, and sneered at the idea that a quiet art teacher could ever be dangerous. Soldiers laughed, cameras rolled, until the air thundered with rotor blades and shadows dropped from the sky. "Superman gonna fly in?" one guard mocked. And then he did. Robbing Ghost Winslow, SEAL commander, fast roped into the chaos, rifle leveled, eyes locked on the woman they thought powerless. What followed wasn't a rescue, it was a reckoning. Tonight on VeteranBiker, we dive into the moment when arrogance collided with truth and froze every man who dared to underestimate her. This is VeteranBiker. Comment 1 if you're new. 2 if you've been with us, 3 if you ride with us every week. Like, subscribe, and stay to the end. The scream cut through the roar of the surf. San Clemente Beach, normally dotted with joggers and surfers, erupted in chaos. A Marine in grey PT gear stumbled across the sand, clutching his side. He collapsed face first, leaving a dark streak in the golden grains. Bystanders froze, some gasping, others retreating, as if the blood itself carried danger. Heather didn't hesitate. She dropped her basket of seashells and sprinted, her sandals flung aside, feet pounding bare against the shore. The man's uniform was smeared crimson, the wound deep, bubbling with every strained breath. She knelt, fingers already tearing through fabric, cutting away the soaked shirt with a pocket blade that no art teacher should have carried. The metallic stench of blood mixed with salt air. Her movements were clinical, measured pressure, swift wrapping, compressing arteries with force no civilian was supposed to know. "Stay with me," she ordered, voice sharp as steel. His eyes flickered open. "Ambush, knife, 2 men." His words broke into a hiss of pain. "Save your strength." She wedged her sweatshirt beneath his ribs, tying it off in a makeshift tourniquet. The crowd murmured, their whispers blending with the surf. Phones appeared, recording, yet no one moved closer to help. Above them, a faint mechanical buzz cut through the cries. Heather's head snapped up. Against the glare of morning sun, a tiny drone hovered. Not a tourist's toy. The angles were military, its lens glinting with predatory intent. Her jaw tightened. She bent low, shielding the Marine with her body, and shifted to block the drone's line of sight. It lingered, watching. Then, with a high-pitched whine, it zipped north along the coastline and vanished beyond the rocks. She forced her focus back to the Marine. His pulse stuttered beneath her grip, erratic but alive. Reaching into her pocket, she pulled out a phone. She didn't dial emergency services. Instead, she pressed a sequence of numbers that bypassed local lines. "This is Heather Winslow. North Shore, San Clemente. 1 casualty, male Marine, deep stab wound near liver. Conscious but deteriorating. You have 10 minutes, not 20. Move." She ended the call before any reply. The Marine's gaze wavered, confusion flickering across his sweat-streaked face. "You're not just—" "Focus on breathing," she snapped, then softened her tone. "What's your name, Corporal?" "Mason, Corporal Mason." "Good. Keep saying it in your head. Mason, you're still here." She pressed gauze against the wound, ignoring the ache building in her arms from constant pressure. A whistle from down the beach, military medics sprinting, stretchers bouncing between them. Heather stood only after Mason was lifted, hands stained red to the elbows. One medic paused, eyeing the precision of her work. He looked at her as if expecting a uniform. She wiped her palms on the sand, forcing herself to look like nothing more than a shaken bystander. "He was lucky," she muttered. The medic gave her a longer look, but moved on. Within seconds, Mason was carried toward the waiting ambulance. Sirens wailed, drowning the surf. Heather stepped back, blending into the scattering crowd. Her sweatshirt gone, her white t-shirt streaked with blood. She retrieved her basket. Seashells rattled against each other, absurdly fragile beside the violence that had just played out. She tugged a jacket from her bag and draped it across the basket to conceal the stains. At the far end of the beach, guards from Fort Horizon blocked access, radios buzzing. They scanned civilians, searching for someone, maybe the attackers, maybe her. Heather lowered her head, walked calmly past a line of Gawkers, and slipped into the parking lot. Inside her old Honda Civic, she gripped the wheel, heart thudding. Her reflection in the rear view was composed, but her pupils betrayed the adrenaline still coursing. She had saved Mason's life, but the drone's presence meant more than random violence. Someone had staged the attack to see how she would react. The question was, who had watched and what had they seen? Heather drove straight to Fort Horizon's front gate. Military police waved her through with casual nods, no ID required. Familiarity worked like armor. To them, she was just the woman who taught kids to paint and sculpt. No one stopped to question the jacket hiding blood or the tension in her grip. Beyond the gates, the base thrummed with morning drills. Recruits jogged in formation, instructors barking cadence. Helicopters thundered overhead. Heather parked near the community center, but she didn't go inside. Instead, she cut across to the medical wing. Rear Admiral Harris was waiting by the entrance, silver hair catching the sun, posture ramrod straight despite a limp earned decades earlier. His eyes fixed on her, measuring. "You found Mason." His voice carried the authority of command, low and steady. "He's alive," Heather answered. "The doctor says whoever stabilized him knew what they were doing." He studied her as if weighing words. "And yet, all reports call you an art teacher." Heather forced a shrug. Red Cross training comes in handy, not when the knife was a Spetsnaz pattern blade. His gaze sharpened, not a beach mugging. Heather's stomach tightened. Russian. Harris leaned closer, lowering his voice. "Walk with me." They moved away from the medbay, past rows of sailors saluting. Heather returned nods, the picture of familiarity. She had spent months cultivating this mask. Gentle teacher, confidant to children with parents overseas, harmless presence, and yet here she was, discussing Russian blades with a decorated admiral. "We intercepted chatter," Harris said once they were alone by the flag courtyard. "Old codes resurfacing, dormant assets waking up. Sound familiar?" Heather kept her tone neutral. "Why tell me?" "Because Colonel Grant just took over base security, the same officer who went missing during Kandahar 2012. Harris's voice hardened. "And his wife chairs the committee that oversees your program." Pieces slid into place. Mason wasn't random. Harris continued, "He was on the team that found unauthorized comms equipment last week, before Grant could bury it." Heather exhaled slowly. The ambush, the drone, the timing, it was all a probe. And now she was on their radar. Harris touched her arm lightly, a gesture meant to look casual. "One more thing. 3 days from now, your husband comes home." For an instant, Heather's composure cracked. Her shoulders straightened, her eyes hardening. She didn't reply. She didn't need to. Harris saw enough. She entered the community center through the back, ducking into the staff restroom. Blood washed from her skin, circling the drain. She pulled on fresh clothes from her locker, forcing herself back into the role of ordinary instructor. When she stepped out, she nearly collided with Clara Grant. Clara's hair was salon perfect, her suit too expensive for a volunteer committee. Her smile was barbed wire wrapped in lipstick. "Winslow," Clara said, "we've cut your budget in half. Supplies, space, everything. Perhaps you'll have more time to consult with officers' husbands." Heather met her gaze evenly. "I consult with all parents, of course you do." Clara's eyes narrowed. "But my husband thinks something about you doesn't add up." For a heartbeat, Heather felt the old instinct flare, the twitch in her fingers, the urge to neutralize a threat. She buried it beneath a calm smile. "Your husband has excellent instincts." Clara faltered, unsettled but quickly recovered. "We'll be watching you." She turned on her heel, heels clicking like gunshots across tile. Heather slipped into her classroom. Children soon filled the space with laughter and chatter, paintbrushes in hand. She guided them, gentle and patient, but her mind churned. Mason's blood, the drone, Harris's warning, Clara's venom. The trap was closing, and she was already inside. By late afternoon, as sunlight slanted through the windows, Heather cleaned pallets and wiped tables. She caught a glimpse of Colonel Grant himself passing by the door. He paused, watching her through the glass. His jaw was tight, his eyes calculating. Heather smiled softly to a little girl mixing colors, pretending not to notice him, but inside she catalogued everything, his stance, his tension, the way his gaze lingered a second too long. The war wasn't coming. It was already here. The community center emptied long after the children left. Paint-stained water jars lined the sink, canvases drying on racks like silent witnesses. Heather stood alone, scrubbing the last streak of blue from her hands. Her reflection in the glass window looked calm, ordinary, but her heart beat with the rhythm of an approaching storm. A shadow stretched across the doorway. Admiral Harris leaned inside, his cane tapping lightly against the tile. "You can't stay much longer," he murmured. "They're already asking questions about you." Heather dried her hands slowly, giving nothing away. "Questions?" "Colonel Grant's men combed the east sector today. He's building dossiers on everyone. Your name keeps surfacing." She set the towel down, voice quiet but steady. "Then we don't have much time." Harris's eyes flicked to the door before he stepped closer. His voice dropped to a near whisper. "We've traced encrypted chatter to Russian handlers, phrases we haven't seen since Kandahar." Grant took command and suddenly the codes returned. "Coincidence? I doubt it." Heather met his gaze, her expression unreadable, but her thoughts swirled. Kandahar wasn't a memory. It was a scar, one she and Robin both carried. "What do you need from me?" she asked. "I need you to keep your head down until reinforcements arrive. Robin's team is wheels up in 72 hours. Hold out until then." The mention of her husband sent a quick jolt through her chest, but she masked it with a nod. "And if Grant moves before that?" Harris's jaw set. "Then you do what you've always done. Survive." He turned and left, the cane's echo fading. Heather gathered her bag, carefully sliding the folder Clara had given her into the bottom. It was more than a budget document. It was bait, a way to measure her response. Clara had played her hand too eagerly, and Heather knew better than to ignore it. The next morning dawned clear, the base buzzing with preparation for the anniversary celebrations. Banners draped across hangars, speakers tested microphones, and security checkpoints sprouted like weeds. Heather walked across the courtyard, basket tucked under one arm, her face composed in its usual mask of gentle cheer. But her eyes scanned everything, guard rotations, camera angles, even the way certain soldiers avoided meeting her gaze. At the chow hall, whispers followed her. "That's her," a private muttered, "the one who pulled Mason back from the edge." Others glanced up from their trays, curiosity and suspicion mixing in equal measure. Heather ignored them, collected coffee, and took a seat by the window. From here she saw Colonel Grant, crisp uniform, jaw squared, speaking into a radio. Clara hovered at his side, her smile a razor hidden in silk. Grant looked up, caught Heather's stare, and held it for several long seconds before turning away. Heather sipped her coffee, every nerve taut. This was no longer subtle surveillance, it was open declaration. That afternoon the trap snapped tighter. Heather had just arranged brushes for her next class when the door banged open. 2 MPs strode in, boots striking like hammers. Behind them came a squad of soldiers in full gear, their eyes scanning the walls, the supply cabinets, even the children's drawings taped along the windows. The students froze. One boy dropped his crayon. It rolled across the floor like a tiny shell casing. Heather rose slowly, every movement deliberate. "Can I help you?" "Routine inspection," one MP barked. "Everyone stay seated." The children shrank back in their chairs, wide-eyed. Heather's pulse raced, but she kept her tone level. "This is a classroom. You're frightening them." "Orders," the MP snapped, already rifling through shelves. Another soldier yanked open her supply cabinet, scattering paints and clay onto the floor. Heather knelt beside the children, forcing her voice calm. "It's all right, they're just checking for safety." She stroked a little girl's hair, hiding the way her own fingers trembled with restrained fury. A boy tugged at her sleeve. "Miss Winslow, is something wrong?" "No," she lied smoothly. "Focus on your work." But her eyes tracked every motion. One soldier moved toward the corner where her locked satchel lay hidden beneath a stack of canvases. Inside were tools she couldn't risk losing: encrypted phone, compact medkit, fragments of her other life. The soldier bent, reaching. Heather stood quickly, intercepting with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "That's just student portfolios, nothing you need." She shifted the canvases subtly, angling her body to block the satchel. The soldier hesitated, then straightened at the sound of footsteps. Colonel Grant himself entered, flanked by Clara. The classroom went silent. Grant scanned the room, gaze settling on Heather, his lips curled in a faint mockery of a smile, conducting inspections, nothing personal. Heather's heart hammered, but she forced a polite nod. "Of course, though it seems excessive." "Excessive!" Grant's voice was low, smooth, but dripping with threat. He stepped closer, his presence filling the room. "We take security seriously. Anyone could be a risk, even an art teacher." The children stirred uncomfortably. Heather crouched to reassure them, then rose to meet his stare, their eyes locked, steel against ice. "Is that what you think I am? A risk?" she asked, voice steady. Grant's smile widened. "I think you'll find out soon enough." Clara touched his arm lightly, pretending gentility, but her eyes gleamed with venom. "We wouldn't want anything unfortunate to happen here, would we?" Heather glanced around at the children, at the soldiers looming with rifles slung. She felt the walls closing, yet she forced her expression serene, unwilling to give them the satisfaction of fear. Grant lingered one moment longer, then barked an order. The soldiers filed out, leaving overturned supplies and trembling students behind. When the door shut, silence pressed heavy. Heather drew a slow breath. "All right, everyone, let's clean up. We won't let a little mess stop us, will we?" The children nodded hesitantly, clinging to her composure as if it were armor. Inside, Heather's fury burned. Grant had crossed a line, humiliating her in front of the innocent, planting suspicion in fertile soil. He wanted her rattled. Instead, he had only sharpened her resolve. That evening, she drove home along the coast road, headlights sweeping across jagged cliffs. Every few minutes she checked her mirror. The same dark sedan trailed half a block back, never too close, never too far. She turned onto her private lane, pulling into her beachfront cottage. She parked, entered, and moved with practiced precision. Curtains drawn, locks secured, sensors checked. Only then did she allow herself to slip into the guest room, her palm pressed against the thermostat. A hidden panel slid open, revealing the chamber behind. Monitors glowed to life, flooding the space with cold light. Camera feeds, encrypted channels, satellite overlays, her real world humming awake. She sat, typing rapidly. A report pulsed across the screen. Inspection staged. Colonel Grant probing. Clara complicit. Surveillance drone confirmed. Threat escalation imminent. Her handler's reply flashed seconds later. Hold position. Maintain cover. Ghost inbound. 72 hours. Heather leaned back, exhaling. 72 hours felt like a lifetime. But after today, She knew one thing with bone-deep certainty: Grant wasn't waiting 3 days to move. The following morning, Heather arrived on base early. The air smelled of coffee and diesel, soldiers marching in cadence across the parade grounds. She carried a loaf of bread, warm from her oven, wrapped in plain cloth. Sergeant Major Cole stood near the motor pool, clipboard in hand, his weathered face scanning recruits. When he saw her, his sternness softened. "You're up early, Miss Winslow." Heather held out the bread. "Thought you might like this with your coffee." Cole took it, eyes narrowing slightly in understanding. Bread was their signal. "We need to talk, privately." He gestured toward his office. "Come on then, fresh pot's waiting." Inside, he shut the door and flicked on a small device. A faint hum filled the air, scrambling any listening devices. "You're in trouble, girl," he said without preamble. His voice was hard, but beneath it lay concern. "Grant's been digging all night. Ordered a background check deeper than I've seen in years, down to your kindergarten records." Heather crossed her arms, masking unease. And people who dig that far usually find what they want, whether it's real or not." Cole leaned forward, eyes sharp. "He's building a case against you." Heather stared at the battered desk between them. "Then I need proof, something to expose him before he buries me." Cole hesitated, then pulled a faded photograph from his drawer. It showed a younger version of himself beside a tall man with piercing eyes, the same eyes Heather saw in her mirror. "Your father saved my life. Berlin, 83. He gave me this before Moscow, told me if anything happened, I should keep an eye on his daughter." Heather traced the photograph with trembling fingers. She had never known the full truth of her father's service, only fragments. Cole's voice softened. "I recognized you the day you stepped on base. I kept quiet, but now you need to know. Grant's not just crooked. He's tied to the same people who took your father." Heather lifted her gaze, eyes burning with quiet fire. "Then we bring him down." The morning broke clear, but Fort Horizon felt different. The usual rhythm of marching boots and shouted cadence carried an undercurrent. Tightened voices, sharper glares, soldiers glancing at each other as though searching for threats in familiar faces. Heather sensed it the moment she stepped through the gates. Something had shifted overnight. Colonel Grant's reach was no longer subtle. It stretched like barbed wire across the entire base. She carried her satchel of brushes and paints, the perfect camouflage. Yet beneath her composed mask, she catalogued everything: the additional guards stationed at the chow hall, the new checkpoints erected at side gates, the increased traffic of military police weaving through corridors. Her classroom, once a sanctuary of color and children's laughter, had become a stage, and Grant was about to use it. It began during second period, when a dozen children hunched over construction paper, whispering in hushed tones as they mixed watercolors. Sunlight streamed across their bent heads, catching the nervous rhythm of their hands. Heather leaned over one boy struggling to shape a circle. She guided his brush gently, murmuring encouragement, forcing warmth into her voice despite the chill in her gut. The door slammed open. 2 MPs entered, faces expressionless, weapons slung across their chests. Behind them came more soldiers, 6 in total, boots striking in unison. The children stiffened. A crayon snapped in half. One girl whimpered softly. Heather straightened. "What's the meaning of this?" "Security inspection," the lead MP barked. "You've been here before," Heather countered, voice calm but edged. "You frightened the children then. Do you intend to do it again?" "Orders." The man's reply was clipped, mechanical. Heather positioned herself between the soldiers and her students, her tone firm. "They're here to learn. Whatever you think you'll find, you won't find it among crayons and finger paints." But the squad spread out, rifling through cabinets, overturning boxes, scattering chalk dust across the floor. A jar of brushes clattered, rolling beneath a desk. One boy whispered, "Miss Winslow, are we in trouble?" Heather crouched briefly, brushing his hair back. "No, you've done nothing wrong. Keep drawing." Her smile was steady, though her jaw clenched with fury. At the back, a soldier pulled open the storage closet. Canvas boards toppled out, along with a stack of folders Heather had carefully arranged to conceal her satchel. Her chest tightened. The soldier bent, reaching for the bag. Heather moved quickly, intercepting with a gentle laugh. "Careful, that's my grading folder. Portfolios from the kids. They'll be devastated if anything happens to their work." She shifted sideways, blocking the satchel with her legs as she scooped up the papers. The soldier frowned but stepped back. For a moment, the room stilled. Then Colonel Grant walked in. Silence. The children froze, eyes wide. Clara followed close behind, her heels tapping in a rhythm of smugness, her perfume cutting through the stench of tension. Grant surveyed the room with deliberate slowness. His uniform was immaculate, his bearing exuding controlled dominance. When his gaze locked on Heather, the air seemed to constrict. "Routine inspection," he said, voice smooth but carrying an edge that vibrated in the children's bones. Heather forced a nod. "So I've heard." Grant stepped closer. He stopped beside a girl's easel, studying the crude depiction of a flag painted in shaky brushstrokes. "Impressive work," he murmured, though the smile on his lips never touched his eyes. He turned to Heather. "You run a tight ship." Heather met his stare evenly. "I run a classroom. Security is everyone's responsibility." Grant's tone hardened, calculated for the children's ears. Even civilians, especially civilians. One boy raised his hand timidly. "Sir, Miss Winslow just teaches us to paint." Grant chuckled, a low sound that sent a ripple through the room. "Does she now?" His gaze slid back to Heather, pinning her in place. "Interesting." Clara stepped forward, voice dripping with disdain. "Colonel, perhaps this is not the best use of your men's time, unless, of course, you suspect something." The implication hung heavy. The children shifted uneasily, glancing between their teacher and the towering officer. Heather's pulse thundered, but she kept her voice even. "You've made your point. Can we end this charade before the children suffer more than they already have?" Grant's smile widened, but it was cold. "We'll leave, for now," he gestured. The soldiers filed out, leaving chaos in their wake. Clara lingered at the doorway, her smirk razor-sharp. "Enjoy your little art class while it lasts, Winslow. The Colonel has long memories." When they were gone, Heather exhaled slowly. The children looked at her with wide eyes, fear mixing with confusion. She forced a warm smile. They were just being thorough. "Now let's clean up. We've got more work to finish." The children nodded hesitantly, brushes dipped back into paint. Slowly the room returned to fragile normalcy, but Heather knew the attack was deliberate. It wasn't about finding anything, it was about breaking her in front of those she protected. Hours later, Heather walked across the parade ground. Her satchel, still intact, weighed heavily at her side. She passed a group of young soldiers. Their conversation hushed until she approached. Their eyes darted to her, then away. The rumor mill was already grinding. At the far end, Sergeant Major Cole intercepted her. He had a stack of papers in hand, but his eyes were sharp. "I heard what happened," he said. "They're escalating," Heather replied. Cole glanced around before lowering his voice. "Grant wants you rattled. He wants you to slip." "Then he'll be waiting a long time." Cole studied her face, then nodded. "Good, because we've got bigger problems." He led her into a maintenance corridor, shutting the door behind them. He pulled a folded blueprint from his pocket and spread it on a workbench. "This," he said, jabbing a calloused finger, "is the East Sector Communications Hub. Contractors, Russian by the look of them, were seen hauling cases inside, not standard gear. And guess who signed off on it?" Heather didn't answer. She didn't have to. Cole's eyes narrowed. "You want proof against Grant? You'll find it there." Heather studied the blueprint, tracing possible entry points, security rotations, blind spots, access hatches. She memorized every detail. Then she folded the paper neatly, tucked it back into Cole's pocket, and met his eyes. "When?" "Shift change, tomorrow at 1300. System resets for 3 seconds. That's your window." Heather nodded. Understood. That night, Heather returned to her cottage. Waves pounded the shore outside, but the sound no longer calmed her. Inside her hidden room, she activated secure channels. Her report was concise. Grant tightening net. Public intimidation attempt in classroom. Hub infiltration scheduled tomorrow. The reply came almost instantly. Proceed with caution. Do not compromise cover. Extraction still 72 hours. Heather stared at the screen, jaw set. Cover was already fraying. The classroom spectacle had ensured that. Tomorrow would either give her the proof she needed or expose her entirely. Morning arrived brittle with tension. Heather dressed simply, pulling her jacket tighter against the chill as she walked the base corridors. Soldiers watched her with guarded curiosity. Whispers chased her footsteps. She taught her morning class with calm precision, though her mind was elsewhere. Every brush stroke her students painted felt like a countdown. At 1245, she dismissed the children early. She packed her satchel, slid a forged work order inside, and moved toward the east sector. Her face betrayed nothing, but every nerve screamed with alertness. At 1300, the system reset. Cameras blinked for 3 seconds. Heather slipped through the service door, heart pounding. Inside, fluorescent lights buzzed over humming servers. The air smelled of ozone and new wiring. She crouched, scanning quickly. And there they were, devices no civilian contractor should have touched. Small modules latched onto critical junctions, their LEDs blinking a sinister rhythm. She raised her phone, snapping photos with practiced speed. Evidence undeniable. Then footsteps echoed. Heather slid the phone away, snatched her forged work order, and positioned herself beside a junction box as though adjusting wiring. The door opened. Colonel Grant entered with Volkov at his side. Grant's gaze landed on her. Surprise flickered, then suspicion. "Miss Winslow," he drawled. "What are you doing here?" Heather looked up, eyes wide in feigned confusion. "Sergeant Major Cole assigned me to community service. Something about teaching me the value of maintenance work." She held up the work order, paper trembling just enough to appear genuine. Grant plucked it from her hand, studied it. "This authorization is for tomorrow." Heather's face flushed with embarrassment. "I must have misread. My apologies, I'll come back later." Grant's smile was thin, dangerous. "No need. Since you're already here, finish the job, under supervision." Volkov moved closer, blocking the exit. Heather's pulse hammered, but her expression remained placid. She bent over the panel, tools clinking softly, pretending to work. Behind her, she felt Grant's gaze burning into her back. Every second was a razor edge. Heather kept her head bowed, the hum of the junction box masking her ragged heartbeat. The fluorescent light buzzed above, harsh and unforgiving. Colonel Grant's shadow fell across her, broad and immovable. Volkov lingered near the exit, arms folded, his posture radiating threat. Heather forced her hands steady. She loosened a screw, tugged at a wire, anything to look busy. Each second felt like walking a tightrope over a pit. "Interesting skill set for an art teacher," Grant said at last, his voice measured, sharp enough to cut glass. Heather didn't look up. Electric panels aren't much different from mixing pigments, just patience and steady hands. Volkov snorted, the sound more animal than human. Grant stepped closer. She smelled starch and metal, the faint tang of aftershave. "You know," he continued softly, "you remind me of someone. Kandahar, 2012. We had a civilian advisor on base, always watching, always listening. She had eyes like yours." Heather adjusted a cable, careful not to let her breath hitch. "Sounds like you meet a lot of people, Colonel." He leaned down, voice brushing her ear. "Some of them don't walk away." Before Heather could reply, the door banged open. Rear Admiral Harris strode in, cane striking the tile like a gavel. "Colonel Grant," he barked, "why are civilian contractors in a classified hub without clearance?" Grant turned, irritation flashing before he masked it. "Admiral, these men are consultants, authorized, not according to Washington." Harris lifted a tablet, screen glowing with an official order. All external work suspended pending Pentagon review. "I suggest you brush up on your chain of command." For a heartbeat, the room froze. Volkov's jaw tightened. Grant's fists clenched at his sides. Heather seized the opening. She shut the panel with a snap and straightened. "All done here," she said briskly, slipping past Grant before he could react. She followed Harris out, every nerve screaming under the weight of Grant's glare burning into her back. Once outside, Harris lowered his voice. "You took a dangerous risk." Heather exhaled shakily. "I had no choice. He's hiding something in there. Russian hardware. I saw it." Harris's expression hardened. "Then we're running out of time." They parted quickly, both aware they were being watched. Heather returned to her classroom, forcing herself to wear the mask of calm again. Children filed in, chatter spilling like water over stones. She guided them through projects, but her mind replayed every second in that hub. Volkov's eyes, Grant's insinuations, the way he said Kandahar. When the bell rang and the children dispersed, she sank into her chair, exhaustion creeping through her bones. Later that evening, Heather parked near the base chapel. It was one of the few places free from surveillance by regulation. She slipped inside, the air cool and still, candles flickering near the altar. Lieutenant Commander Vega was already there, kneeling briefly before rising to greet her. "Miss Winslow," Vega said quietly, "thank you again for defending your program yesterday. My kids owe you more than you know." Heather managed to smile. "They helped me as much as I helped them." Vega tilted her head. "That's not why you asked me here, is it?" Heather hesitated, then produced a flash drive from her satchel. "If anything happens to me, this goes straight to Admiral Harris, no one else. It holds photos of Grant with Volkov in the hub, enough to expose them." Vega accepted the drive, eyes narrowing with realization. "You're not just a teacher." Heather met her gaze steadily. "Let's just say I've seen what men like Grant can do. I won't let him take this base." Vega's jaw tightened. "For what happened in Kandahar, I'll help you. My husband never walked again because of that betrayal." Heather nodded, gratitude unspoken. Together, they lit a candle, an unvoiced pact sealed in the quiet chapel. Night at Heather's cottage was rarely silent. Sensors blinked green, cameras panned across dunes, every detail calibrated. She kneaded bread dough in the kitchen, flour dusting her hands when the knock came. 2 men in plain clothes stood on her porch. One flashed a badge. "Sergeant Walsh, base security." "This is Corporal Hernandez. We need to ask a few questions." Heather invited them in, playing the role flawlessly. The living room displayed stacks of children's drawings, art books, a half-finished landscape on the easel, every trace of her double life concealed. "Where were you between 5 and 7 this morning?" Walsh asked bluntly. "Here until 6, Heather said, feigning thought. "Then I walked the beach, collecting shells. I do it most mornings. Did you see anyone unusual?" "Joggers, surfers. Oh, and an injured Marine. I helped him until medics arrived." She let genuine concern color her tone. "Is he all right?" Hernandez studied her intently. "You applied a combat grade, field dressing, not typical Red Cross training." Heather blinked, projecting modest surprise. "I've taken courses. When you work with children, you prepare for emergencies. I just did what I could." The interrogation stretched on, probing her background, her movements. She answered each question with the right balance of cooperation and confusion, the portrait of a civilian caught in events beyond her control. Finally, Walsh stood. "Colonel Grant may have more for you tomorrow." Heather let a flicker of apprehension touch her features. "Am I in trouble?" Just routine, Walsh assured, though his eyes said otherwise. As they left, Hernandez paused. Do you live alone? Heather lowered her gaze. Yes. My fiancé, he was killed in Afghanistan 5 years ago. Haven't shared my life since. Sympathy softened their faces. They departed quietly. Heather closed the door, waited a full minute, then slipped into her hidden room. She typed quickly. Security questioning escalated. Grant directing personally. Cover compromised. Ghost Ite requested. The reply 48 hours. Hold position. She closed her eyes. 2 more days. She could endure it. She had to. The following dawn, Heather walked onto base earlier than usual. The sun was barely cresting the horizon, painting steel buildings in pale fire. Sergeant Major Cole spotted her, steaming mug in hand. You're early, he said. Couldn't sleep. She handed him a loaf of bread, still warm. He raised an eyebrow, their agreed signal. He ushered her inside his office, shutting the door and switching on the jammer. Grant's men spent the night digging through your history, he said. He wants dirt and he'll manufacture it if he can't find it. Heather folded her arms. Then we get ahead of him. Proof he's the traitor, not me. Cole considered, then nodded. He's moving Russian contractors into the communications hub today. Janitor called in sick. Convenient, huh? I can slip you in under maintenance cover. Community service hours. No one will question it. Heather allowed herself a thin smile, always looking out for me. Cole's eyes softened. I promised your father I would. Heather froze. You knew him? Knew him? Cole opened a drawer, pulled out a faded photo. He saved my life more than once. Berlin, 83. Best intelligence officer I ever met. Recognized you the second you walked on this base. Same eyes. Heather traced the outline of her father's face in the photo. A wave of emotion she rarely permitted rose in her chest. Cole's voice gentled. He wanted you safe. But if you're going after Grant, you'll need allies. Vega's one. I've got a couple more who despise him. His betrayal in Kandahar left scars that haven't healed. Heather pocketed the memory, straightened her shoulders. Then let's finish what my father started. Heather walked the E-sector alone, clipboard tucked under her arm, maintenance badge clipped neatly to her blouse. On the surface, she looked like just another civilian volunteer stuck with an unglamorous chore. But her every step was calibrated, every glance measured, every breath controlled. The communications hub loomed ahead, its concrete walls bathed in harsh midday light. Antennas bristled from the roof like spears, their tips catching the sun. Soldiers drifted past on routine patrols, none giving her more than a cursory glance. The badge Cole had slipped her carried quiet authority, enough to move her through checkpoints without resistance. At 12:58 she positioned herself by the rear service entrance. Cole's timing echoed in her head. 1,300 sharp, system reset, 3 seconds blind. The guard at the door barely looked up as he scanned her pass. The device chirped green. He waved her through. Inside, the air was cold, humming with machinery. Racks of servers blinked with restless lights, cables running in tight bundles along the walls. The smell of ozone stung her nostrils. Heather walked briskly, scanning corners, absorbing details. There, mounted to a primary junction box, small metallic modules no contractor should ever touch. Their design was foreign, efficient, predatory. Each emitted a faint pulse, piggybacking on the hub's signal streams. Russian, without question. She pulled a compact device from her satchel, disguised as a multi-tool. With a flick, she activated its scanner. Frequencies bled onto her screen, encrypted streams rerouting traffic beyond the base perimeter. Data siphons. This wasn't surveillance, it was a takeover. She snapped photographs quickly, every angle captured. Then she slid a flash drive into a concealed port, uploading a ghost program designed to duplicate data silently, rerouting a hidden feed into a secure server. Her hands moved fast, efficient. Halfway through, she froze. Voices. She yanked the drive free and pivoted to the nearest panel, wrench in hand, crouched as though fixing loose wiring. The door swung open. Colonel Grant entered with Volkov at his side, another Russian trailing them with a heavy case. Grant stopped dead when he saw her. "Miss Winslow," he said smoothly, though surprise flickered in his eyes. "What an unexpected pleasure." Heather forced a sheepish smile, lifting her clipboard. "Sergeant Major Cole assigned me to community service, electrical checks. Something about learning discipline." She tapped the forged work order. Grant stepped forward, snatching the paper. He read silently, then glanced up. "This authorization is for tomorrow." Heat crawled at the back of Heather's neck, though her voice remained contrite. Must have misread. "I'll come back." "No." Grant's tone sharpened. "Since you're here, finish. Under supervision." Volkov shifted, deliberately positioning himself between Heather and the exit. Heather bent to the panel again, unscrewing a harmless bolt while her mind raced. The flash drive burned in her pocket like contraband. "You know," Grant said conversationally, "my wife tells me you're quite the artist. Former journalist too, wasn't it? Interesting career path." Heather forced a laugh. "War zones change your perspective. I wanted something quieter." Volkov chuckled darkly. "Quieter? On this base? Wrong posting, lady." Heather tightened the last bolt and stood, all finished. "Connection looks fine." Grant's eyes bored into hers. "Strange. You remind me of Kandahar. I could swear I saw your face in that dust storm." Heather's pulse spiked, but before she could answer, the door burst open again. "Colonel," Admiral Harris barked, stepping inside with his cane striking hard. "What the hell are foreign contractors doing in this hub?" Grant's jaw tightened. "They're consultants. Authorized upgrades, not anymore." Harris thrust forward a tablet displaying orders. Pentagon froze all external work, effective immediately. The Russians stiffened. Volkov's gaze turned murderous. Harris looked to Heather. "Winslow, you done here?" Heather nodded quickly. "Then go." Harris's command was iron. Heather slipped past Volkov, feeling his glare stab between her shoulders. She exited, lungs burning with the pressure of restraint. Back in her classroom, she shut the door and locked it. Her hands shook as she pulled the flash drive from her pocket. She plugged it into her encrypted phone, scanning the files. Images filled the screen, Russian modules spliced into Fort Horizon's communications backbone, hard evidence, enough to destroy Grant if she could get it to Harris intact, but she knew better than to assume she was safe. The classroom windows rattled faintly as a military convoy rolled past. Every shadow felt like eyes. When her students arrived, she forced her mask back on. She guided them through collages and paper cutouts, smiling, laughing, but inside she measured time, waiting for the next move. That night, Heather avoided her home. She knew surveillance would be heavy, possibly even a raid. Instead, she drove to the old maintenance depot at the edge of the training grounds. Cole had given her a key long ago, claiming it was for emergencies. Inside, dust hung thick, but the office at the back was secure. She activated her encrypted channel and uploaded the evidence. A reply pinged seconds later, data received. Proof confirmed. Maintain cover. Ghost ETA, 48 hours. Relief and dread warred in her chest. She had the proof, but now Grant knew she was sniffing too close. 2 days felt like an eternity. The following afternoon, Heather attended the planning committee for the anniversary celebration. The room buzzed with tension. Banners, seating charts, endless logistics sprawled across the table. Clara presided at the head, her smile a weapon. "The Secretary of Defense has confirmed attendance," she announced sweetly. "So has the Commandant of the Marine Corps. This celebration must be flawless." Her eyes slid to Heather. "Which is why we've reassigned your role. Children's artwork doesn't meet the standard. You'll be serving refreshments instead." A murmur rippled around the table. Heather's expression remained serene. The children will be disappointed. For many, it was their one chance to contribute to something bigger. Clara's smile tightened. "We're not here to coddle feelings, we're here to honor the base." Heather inclined her head, feigning compliance. Whatever serves best. But her mind catalogued every detail: security layouts, evacuation routes, staging areas, weak points, vulnerabilities, all chosen by Grant's hand. When the meeting ended, Clara intercepted her by the doorway. "Funny," she whispered, leaning close. "You keep showing up in the wrong places at the wrong times." Heather offered a calm smile. "Must be bad luck." Clara's eyes gleamed. "My husband doesn't believe in luck. Neither do I." Heather returned home late, exhaustion dragging at her bones. She locked the doors, activated the sensors, and slipped into her hidden room. She stared at the feeds, cameras across the base, infrared sweeps, comm intercepts. The Russians had entrenched themselves. Grant controlled security, Clara controlled appearances. The noose was tightening, and somewhere out there, Robin and his team were racing toward her. 2 days. Just 2 days. She leaned back, whispering to the dark, "Hold, Heather, just hold." Fort Horizon dressed itself in celebration, but the smiles were brittle. Flags stretched taut between buildings. Rows of folding chairs filled the parade ground, brass polished until it gleamed under the Californian sun. On the surface, it was a commemoration of 75 years of service. Beneath, Heather felt the tension in every salute, every sidelong glance, every whisper that fell silent when she entered a room. The morning committee session had already soured her mood. Clara commanded the gathering like a hostess at a gala, her voice smooth and pleasant, her orders as cutting as blades. She waved a hand at Heather's contribution, the mural sketches her students had labored over for weeks, and dismissed them in front of everyone. "Lovely," Clara cooed. "But we've decided the wall will showcase military insignia instead. Precision, order, not childish smears. You'll assist the catering staff instead. Surely that's more appropriate." Heather's jaw tightened, but she inclined her head. "Of course." Around the table, officers avoided her eyes. Only Vega's gaze lingered, sharp with sympathy. By midday, Heather found herself in the supply hangar, unpacking boxes of table linens. She blended in among junior staff, smiling faintly, masking the coil of fury tightening in her chest. Grant and Clara weren't just squeezing her out of relevance, they were isolating her, stripping away legitimacy until only suspicion remained. Sergeant Major Cole appeared in the doorway, coffee thermos in hand. He moved with the ease of a man who knew how to slip unnoticed into any room. "Don't waste energy on tablecloths," he muttered, helping her tug a heavy crate onto a dolly. "I found something you need to see." Heather's eyes narrowed. "Where?" "In archives, old personnel records. Thought I'd be chasing ghosts, but your father's name turned up." He glanced over his shoulder, voice dropping lower. "Bring your satchel tonight, East Wing, after 1900. That evening, Heather walked the echoing corridors of the East Wing, her footsteps swallowed by the hush of storage vaults. Cole waited by a steel door, a battered key in his hand. He unlocked it, ushered her inside, and switched on a bare bulb. Dust hung thick. Boxes lined the shelves, their labels faded with age. Cole pulled one down and flipped it open. Inside were folders stamped with obsolete clearance codes. "Your father kept notes," Cole said, handing her a thin leather journal. "Not official reports, personal records. He didn't trust the system after Berlin." Heather turned the brittle pages, her chest tightening. Handwriting she hadn't seen since childhood stretched across the paper. Sharp, precise, sketches of cipher wheels, lists of names, phrases in Russian crossed out, rewritten, and there, underlined twice, Vanguard. Her breath caught. He knew. Cole nodded grimly. He suspected someone in Washington was feeding Moscow information even back then. He never lived to prove it. Heather traced the ink with trembling fingers. The words seemed to pulse on the page, alive with menace even decades later. "He left me a warning," she whispered, "and now it's resurfaced through Grant." Cole laid a hand on her shoulder. "This is the leverage you need. If Vanguard still exists, Grant isn't the top of the ladder. He's a rung. Knock him off, and the whole structure might shake loose." Heather closed the journal gently, fire hardening her voice. "Then that's what I'll do." The next morning, Clara staged another strike. Heather arrived at the mess hall to find her classroom had been locked. A notice taped to the door read, "Program suspended, pending review." Children clustered nearby, confused, clutching sketchbooks. Heather crouched among them, forcing a smile. "It's only temporary," she assured, though rage burned beneath her calm. "Take your projects home for now. We'll paint again soon." Clara peered down the corridor, heels striking in triumph. "Security has concerns, Heather. Until they're resolved, your activities are on hold. I'm sure the children will understand." Heather stood slowly, meeting her rival's eyes. "Children understand more than you think." For a moment, Clara's mask cracked, then she swept away, leaving the echo of her laughter. Heather carried the journal hidden in her satchel as she crossed the base. The knowledge of her father's unfinished fight sat heavy but steady inside her. She no longer felt like a teacher wearing a mask of steel. She felt like a soldier reclaiming her heritage. At dusk, she joined Cole and Vega in a deserted corner of the motor pool. They leaned against a jeep, engines humming nearby, masking their voices. "This is bigger than Grant," Heather said, holding up the journal. "My father was chasing Vanguard 30 years ago. The name hasn't changed. That means it's not just one man, it's a network, someone high enough to survive decades." Vega's eyes narrowed, and Grant answers to them. Cole nodded. "Which means taking him down publicly won't be enough. We need to expose the chain above him." Heather closed the journal, her voice firm. "Then we start at the anniversary ceremony. He wants to make me a scapegoat. We'll turn his stage into our proof." As night blanketed the coast, Heather sat on the porch of her cottage, the sea wind tangling her hair. She opened the journal once more, fingers tracing her father's words. He had written about truth as a weapon, about shadows that only grew if left unchallenged. She whispered to the waves, "I won't let you down." Inside, her encrypted phone buzzed. A single message appeared. "Ghost Team, ETA 24 hours. Relief surged, tempered by the knowledge of what still lay ahead. She slipped the journal back into its hiding place, locked the sensors, and extinguished the light. Tomorrow, the stage would be set. The morning sun blazed mercilessly on Fort Horizon's parade ground. Rows of folding chairs gleamed in neat symmetry, a stage draped in red, white, and blue banners towering above. Sailors and Marines filled the seats in crisp uniforms, their faces solemn beneath the weight of ceremony. The air vibrated with marching band rehearsals and the murmur of dignitaries gathering in the VIP section. Heather stood off to the side, tray in hand, dressed in the plain white of the catering staff. Clara had seen to that humiliation personally. She moved between rows with practiced ease, offering water and coffee, her face carefully neutral, but her eyes never stopped scanning. Every camera perched on scaffolding, every soldier stationed at the perimeter, every twitch in the crowd, she absorbed it all. Behind the stage, Colonel Grant commanded the security detail like a puppeteer. He spoke into his radio, every order crisp, every movement rehearsed. At his side, Volkov loomed, his expression flat, scanning the sea of faces with predatory intent. Admiral Harris approached Heather quietly, pausing as she handed a bottle to a general. "He's preparing something," Harris murmured without turning his head. "Be ready." Heather gave the faintest nod and drifted away. The ceremony began with pomp and polish. A color guard marched in, rifles gleaming. The band swelled with the national anthem, voices rising from the crowd. Heather stood among the catering staff at the edge of the grounds, her tray balanced, her pulse steady but fast. Then Grant stepped to the podium. Applause rolled across the square, though it was measured, not exuberant. He waited until silence fell, then began. 75 years, he intoned, his voice amplified across speakers. 75 years of service, sacrifice, and vigilance. But vigilance means nothing if the enemy stands among us. The crowd shifted, murmurs rippling. Heather's chest tightened. Grant raised a hand. "This morning, my security team uncovered evidence of espionage, Russian infiltration, here at Fort Horizon, and the culprit is not who you think." Heather's name exploded across the speakers. Every head turned. Hundreds of eyes bored into her at once. Her tray tilted, cups rattled. She steadied them with iron control, forcing herself to stand still. Grant's voice thundered. "Heather Winslow, presented as a teacher, trusted with our children, has been feeding intelligence to our enemies. Proof has been secured. She is nothing but a spy." Gasps surged. A cameraman swung his lens toward her, capturing the frozen mask she wore. Heather's throat felt scorched, but she forced words past it. "That's a lie!" Grant's hand snapped out. "Bring her forward!" Armed MPs surged through the crowd, closing in. The catering staff scattered. Heather took one step back, but stopped. Running now would confirm the lie. Before she could move, Clara's voice sliced through the commotion. "And to show the price of treachery." She gestured grandly. Lieutenant CMDR Vega was dragged onto the stage by 2 soldiers, wrists bound, face bloodied. The crowd erupted in shouts. Heather's stomach lurched. Grant barked. "String him to the flagpole." The order cracked like a whip. Soldiers obeyed, yanking Vega upward by ropes until his boots dangled inches off the stage floor. His chest heaved, face twisted in pain, but he remained silent, refusing to give them spectacle. "This is what betrayal costs," Grant declared, pointing toward Vega. "And Winslow will join him if she resists." Heather's blood thundered. She felt the weight of her father's journal against her ribs, the knowledge of Vanguard burning inside her. She could not let this charade stand. She stepped forward, tray clattering to the ground. "You're lying!" Her voice carried, cutting through the shouts. "The only traitor here is standing at that podium." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Cameras pivoted, catching her defiance. Grant's face twisted, but he spread his arms theatrically. "You see? Denial, even in the face of proof. Search her. You'll find the devices she's planted." MPs lunged toward her. Heather twisted, shoving one aside, sidestepping another. The crowd roared, half in confusion, half in fear. Soldiers raised rifles, but Admiral Harris stormed to the edge of the stage, cane slamming against the wood. "Stand down!" he thundered. "This is not a tribunal!" The band faltered, brass instruments shrieking into silence. Heather seized the moment. She darted forward, scaling the steps to the stage. 2 MPs grabbed her arms, wrenching them back, but she shouted over the chaos, "Grant is the mole!" He planted Russian hardware in the hub. "I saw it myself! He serves Vanguard!" The name detonated like a grenade. Senior officers in the front row stiffened, shock flashing across their faces. The crowd surged with noise. Grant's fury cracked through his mask. "Silence her!" he roared. The MPs forced Heather to her knees, cameras capturing every second. Vega dangled above, rope creaking under his weight. His eyes met hers, defiant even in agony. Clara leaned close to Grant, voice dripping venom. "End this now." Grant raised his pistol. He leveled it at Heather's head. For a moment, the entire parade ground froze. Time suspended, breaths caught, the weight of history pressing down. Heather's mind raced. If this was how she died, at least the cameras had caught her accusation. Vanguard's name was out, but she refused to bow. She lifted her chin, eyes locked on Grant's, and then the distant thrum of rotors rolled across the sky, heads tilted upward. A shadow swept across the parade ground as a Blackhawk thundered overhead. Ropes snaked down, figures sliding with lethal precision. Ghost Team had arrived. The crowd erupted, half cheering, half screaming. Soldiers scrambled. Clara shrieked, grabbing Grant's arm. Heather surged upward, wrenching free of the MPs in the confusion. The ropes holding Vega groaned as bullets cracked overhead, Ghost Team firing to cover their descent. Chaos consumed the anniversary ceremony. And Heather, standing defiant on the stage, knew the true battle had only just begun. The Blackhawk's rotors hammered the air, whipping banners into ribbons and sending dust spiraling across the parade ground. Soldiers scattered as ropes snapped taut, dark figures sliding fast toward the stage. Ghost Team moved with the precision of wolves, boots hitting concrete, rifles up before the crowd could blink. Robin Ghost Winslow landed at the front, visor down, rifle steady. He swept his weapon in a lethal arc across the security cordon. His men fanned out instantly, locking the square into their grip. Heather's chest clenched at the sight of him, her husband back from shadows, eyes hidden but presence unmistakable. Relief threatened to weaken her knees, but there was no time for reunion. Grant yanked Clara backward, pistol still aimed at Heather. "Stay down!" he barked, his voice cracking through the chaos. MPs scrambled, some lowering weapons in confusion as the SEALs cut through their lines. Heather seized the moment. She lunged for the pulley controls at the flagpole. With a wrench of her arm, she jammed the lever. The rope slackened violently, dropping Vega to the platform in a heap. He coughed, gasping, alive but battered. "Move!" Heather shouted, hauling him upright. Bullets snapped overhead. Ghost Team returned fire with ruthless efficiency, cutting down Grant's loyalists as they tried to flank the stage. The audience of dignitaries screamed, ducking behind rows of chairs. Cameras continued rolling, broadcasting every second to the world. Grant fired a wild shot. The round ricocheted off metal inches from Heather's head. She shoved Vega toward cover, spun and locked eyes with Grant. "This ends now," she shouted over the din. Grant sneered. "You don't understand what you're up against. I'm just the beginning." Clara clutched his arm, her perfect facade crumbling into raw fear. "We have to go!" But Grant wasn't retreating. He dragged her close, pressing the pistol to her temple. "Back off!" He roared at Ghost Team. "Or she dies!" The square froze. Even the gunfire slowed as everyone recalibrated. Ghost's rifle centered on Grant, but his finger stayed disciplined on the trigger. Heather stepped forward, hands raised slightly, every muscle tense. "Grant, listen, this isn't the way. Vanguard won't save you. They'll burn you the second you're inconvenient." Grant's eyes gleamed with fanatic certainty. "Vanguard is the future. Russia and China are already here, carving the Pacific in half. America is rotting. I chose the winning side." Heather's stomach twisted. His voice carried not desperation but belief, a true disciple of something larger. She kept her tone calm, coaxing. "And Clara? Is she the winning side too, or just another pawn you'll discard?" Clara stiffened in his grip. For a moment, doubt flickered in her eyes. Grant snarled, jamming the gun harder against her. She chose this path. Ghost's voice cut across the square, steady and sharp. "Drop it, Grant. You're boxed in." "My men own every angle. You'll be dead before you can pull that trigger." Grant laughed, high and brittle. "Then let me show you how far this goes." He shoved Clara aside and yanked a small device from his pocket. Sleek, metallic, blinking red. Heather recognized it instantly, a dead man's switch. "One squeeze," he shouted, "and the comms hub goes dark forever." Every channel, every link, every emergency line fried. You'll be deaf and blind across the Pacific. Gasps tore through the crowd. Even Harris paled, gripping his cane with white knuckles. Heather stepped closer, voice low but cutting. "That's not power, Grant. That's suicide. It's leverage," she snapped. "And with it, I'll walk out of here alive." For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then Heather lunged. She closed the distance in a blur, slamming her shoulder into his chest. The switch flew from his hand, spinning across the stage. Grant crashed back, pistol clattering. Clara scrambled away, shrieking. Heather grappled with him, the two tumbling across the boards. He swung a fist. She blocked, drove her knee into his ribs. He snarled, trying to claw for the pistol. Ghost surged forward, but Volkov intercepted, charging from the flank. The Russian was a wall of muscle, knife flashing in his grip. Ghost twisted, parried with his rifle stock, the two colliding in a brutal dance of steel and bone. Heather pinned Grant's arm, forcing it against the stage. His face twisted inches from hers, sweat streaking down his temples. "You think you can stop Vanguard?" he spat. "They're already inside the Pentagon. General Whitmore himself runs the operation. You're fighting shadows." Heather's blood went cold. Whitmore, a name with weight, with reach. Grant used her shock to wrench free, slamming his elbow into her jaw. Pain exploded. She staggered but caught herself, refusing to fall. She countered with a vicious strike to his throat, buying space. The crowd roared as Ghost disarmed Volkov with a bone-crunching twist, sending the knife skittering. He followed with a brutal strike that dropped the Russian flat. Grant stumbled toward the drop-dead man's switch, but Heather dove, sliding across the stage. She snatched it first, gripping it tight. "Game over," she said, her voice like iron. Grant froze, chest heaving. His eyes darted, wild, cornered. Ghost leveled his rifle. "On your knees." For the first time, Grant hesitated, his bravado cracked, sweat dripping down his face. Slowly, he lowered himself, hands raised. MPs who hadn't fled swarmed forward, shackles ready. Heather handed the device to Harris, who secured it in a hardened case. "This is going straight to Washington," the Admiral said grimly. The aftermath unfolded in chaos. Dignitaries were evacuated. MPs secured prisoners. Ghost team swept the grounds for any remaining threats. Heather crouched beside Vega, checking his injuries. His voice was ragged, but his eyes burned with gratitude. "You cut me down." She squeezed his shoulder. "You're not dying on his stage." Nearby, Clara sat trembling, mascara streaked down her cheeks. She stared at her husband in chains, disbelief and fury mingling. "You dragged me into this." "For what?" Grant didn't answer. His eyes were empty now, his fire burned out. Ghost crossed the stage, visor lifted. His gaze met Heather's, and for a heartbeat the chaos faded. The connection between them, unspoken, unbreakable, anchored her. "You held," he said simply. She nodded, voice steady despite the storm inside. "But it isn't finished." Ghost's brow furrowed. "Whitmore," Heather glanced at Harris. The Admiral's face was grim. "If what Grant said is true, this cancer reaches higher than we feared. We'll need every ounce of proof." Heather reached into her satchel and withdrew her father's journal. She placed it in Harris's hands. "The proof started decades ago. He wrote the name Vanguard long before today. My father died chasing it. Now it's our turn." Harris accepted the journal with reverence. "Then we strike at the root." As the sun dipped, turning the ocean to molten gold, Heather stood on the stage where chaos had erupted. Soldiers milled below, their voices hushed, their gazes reverent. Some saluted her openly now, no longer fooled by Grant's lies. She felt Robin's presence at her side, solid, grounding. The war wasn't over. If anything, it had just widened. But tonight, Fort Horizon was safe. Vega was alive. The switch was secured. And Vanguard's name had been ripped from the shadows into the unforgiving light. Heather raised her chin, her voice quiet but certain. This fight didn't end here. It began. The parade ground still reeked of gunpowder and adrenaline. Soldiers moved in tense clusters, securing stragglers, gathering shell casings, ushering shaken civilians toward waiting transports. The sun slid low, painting the base in long, fractured shadows. Heather stood at the edge of the stage, scanning every movement, every flicker of unease. Grant was shackled, kneeling in the dirt, guarded by MPs with rifles at the ready. Clara sat slumped nearby, mascara streaked, staring at nothing. Robin joined Heather, helmet tucked under one arm. His face was streaked with sweat and dust, but his eyes were locked on her. "It's over," he said, though his tone held no conviction. Heather shook her head. "Men like Grant don't plan for surrender. There's something else. He wouldn't have risked everything on one ceremony." As if summoned by her words, Grant lifted his head. Blood streaked his lip, but his grin was sharp. "Farrell, you think you've won? Vanguard is already inside your walls. You can kill me, cage me, parade me like a criminal. None of it matters." Heather crouched in front of him, her gaze like a blade. "Then tell me what matters." Grant chuckled, low and broken. "You'll see soon enough. Check your communications tower at sundown. By then, every line, every satellite uplink, dead. This base will choke in silence." Harris stormed forward, cane striking the pavement. "Where is the trigger?" he demanded. Grant's smile widened. "Closer than you think." An alarm wailed across Fort Horizon. Soldiers scrambled, radios squawking, voices rising in sudden panic. From the eastern sector, a column of smoke curled into the sky. Heather's stomach lurched. "The hub," she breathed. Robin's voice was steel. "Move." They sprinted, ghost team fanning around them. The base blurred past. Vehicles swerving, sailors shouting, civilians rushing for cover. The smoke thickened as they neared the communications building. Sirens shrieked. The hub's main doors had been sealed. Heather slammed her palm against the panel. Dead. Sparks hissed from the edges, circuitry fried. "Back entrance!" she shouted. They circled to the service hatch. Robin drove his boot against the lock. Metal groaned, then gave. They poured inside. The sight hit Heather like a fist. Racks of servers glowed hellish red, wires sparking. Russian modules pulsed faster, feeding data streams to some unseen destination. At the center, a bomb sat wired into the junction, small, compact, deadly. Its timer ticked down 4:52. "Damn it," Robin hissed. "Enough to level this wing." Heather dropped to her knees beside the device. Her fingers moved fast, tracing wires, mapping circuits. Every beep was a heartbeat, every second a hammer. Robin crouched beside her, rifle still ready. "Can you disarm it?" She swallowed hard. "If I had 30 minutes, not 5. Ghost team spread out, covering entrances. Harris's voice crackled over comms. "Status?" Robin answered, calm but clipped. "Bomb in the hub. 5 minutes." Static, then Harris again, Grant's laughing. "He says it's not the only one." Heather's mind raced. Not the only one. She scanned the wiring again and saw it. A second circuit, feeding outward, running deep into the hub. "It's a chain," she muttered. "If this blows, it triggers others. He's laced the base." Robin cursed softly. "So what's the play?" Heather's hands blurred over the wires. "We can't disarm them all, but we can jam the signal." She yanked the flash drive from her satchel, the one loaded with her ghost program. "If I plug this into the mainframe, I can cut the detonation command, but I'll need time." Robin's jaw tightened. "Then take it. I'll buy it." Heather slid under the nearest rack, crawling toward the main terminal. Sparks rained across her shoulders, burning holes in her sleeve. She jammed the drive into the port. Code flooded her screen, cascading lines racing faster than she could track. "Come on," she whispered, fingers flying. Gunfire erupted at the door. Ghost Team shouted, returning fire as Grant's loyalists stormed the building in a final suicidal push. Bullets sparked off steel, echoing like thunder in the confined space. Robin returned fire, his stance unyielding. "Heather!" he shouted. "How long?" "2 minutes!" she called back, sweat streaming down her face. She typed commands, redirecting pathways, slicing through encryption. The timer ticked, 2:31. A grenade clattered across the floor. Robin dove, shoving it back through the doorway with a boot. It detonated outside, shaking the walls. Shrapnel peppered the steel, but the team held the line. Heather overrode the last firewall. The drive pulsed once, twice, then the module's lights flickered. The timer froze at 0:47. Her chest heaved. She ripped the drive free, collapsing against the rack. "It's jammed. Signal's dead." Robin hauled her to her feet, eyes fierce but proud. "Told you you'd hold." The aftermath was chaos once more, but different now. Relief mixed with exhaustion. The bomb squad secured the hub. Harris confirmed secondary devices had been neutralized. Grant was dragged into solitary confinement, still laughing, his eyes wild. Heather sat on the curb outside, the evening breeze cooling the sweat on her skin. Robin dropped beside her, offering a canteen. She drank deeply, then leaned against his shoulder, the weight of survival pressing down. "He named Whitmore," she murmured. Robin nodded grimly. "Vanguard's not just some ghost story, it's a rot at the top." Harris joined them, the journal tucked beneath his arm. His face was carved with determination. "This doesn't end at Fort Horizon. Washington will answer for this, but without you, Winslow, we'd never have seen the truth." Heather glanced at the horizon, where the sun bled into the ocean. "My father chased this 30 years ago. He warned me shadows only grow if you let them. We cut one today, but the root is still alive." Robin clasped her hand. "Then we cut deeper, together." Heather exhaled slowly, finally allowing herself the smallest smile. The battle had nearly broken her cover, nearly broken her spirit, but she had held, and the war her father once fought now burned in her veins. Days later, Fort Horizon began to breathe again. The anniversary banners were quietly taken down. Soldiers returned to drills, families to their routines. The scars of chaos lingered, but so did something new, respect. Where whispers of suspicion once trailed Heather, now salutes greeted her. She resumed her classes in a freshly painted room, children laughing as they dipped brushes into jars of color. When she guided their hands, her own trembled slightly, but not from fear, from the knowledge that hope could be built, even in the shadow of betrayal. Robin trained recruits on the range, his voice carrying across the sand, steady as always. Each evening, he joined Heather by the shore, the two of them silent, watching the tide. The journal rested on her desk at night, pages filled with her father's handwriting. She had added her own notes in the margins, lines that carried his fight forward. One phrase she underlined 3 times: "The good fight never ends. It changes hands." Heather closed the book one night, setting it beside her bed. She whispered into the darkness, not to her father this time, but to herself, "I'm ready." The dust of Fort Horizon has settled, but the echoes remain. Heather did more than survive. She tore open a conspiracy that reached higher than anyone dared admit. Colonel Grant's downfall was dramatic, yet it was only the surface of a darker truth. Vanguard still lingers in the shadows, patient, silent, waiting for its next move. For Heather and Robin, the battle is not about medals or applause. It is about carrying forward a legacy written decades earlier, when her father first warned of enemies hidden in plain sight. It is about the quiet courage of standing your ground, even when the entire world points at you as the traitor, and it is about the belief that the good fight doesn't end, it simply changes hands. As children return to their classrooms, as SEALs sharpen their edge for battles unseen, the question remains, how many more Grants still wear the uniform, waiting for the moment to strike? This is not an ending. It is a reminder that vigilance is the cost of freedom, and some warriors never lay down the fight. You've been watching VeteranBiker. If this story gripped you, hit subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss what comes next. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Who do you think Vanguard really is hiding behind? And don't go anywhere. More incredible stories are waiting for you on screen right now. Click, watch, and ride with us to the very end.